Yeah, you don't need to go to the other end of the world. You just need to decide that this is exciting and I'm going to be curious about it. And once you're interested in everything, then everything becomes interesting. And that's really a lovely feedback loop too.
Welcome to the next episode of Character Talks, where today we have an extraordinary guest who has made adventure his life's work, Alastair Humphreys. Alastair is a British adventurer, author, and a true pioneer of the idea that adventure doesn't have to mean scaling Everest or sailing across oceans, though he's done plenty of that too. Alastair has traveled through over 80 countries by bicycle, boat, and on foot, cycling 46,000 miles around the world and taking on some of the toughest challenges from the Sahara Desert to the Arctic. Named one of National Geographic's Adventurers of the Year in 2012, Alistair is the champion of a concept that brings adventure to all of us, microadventures. These are short, simple, yet profound outdoor experiences that fit into everyday life. In this episode, Alistair will take us through his own incredible journey and share how we can find adventure right outside our doors. Whether it's walking around our city or sleeping under the stars for a night, his philosophy is all about making adventure accessible and meaningful no matter where you are. If you're not listening to this on The Mill, our new adventure-driven social media platform, be sure to check out the show notes to download and join our community of adventurers, big and small. For now, sit back, get ready to be inspired, and let's dive into the world of microadventures with Alastair Humphreys. All right, adventurers, welcome to another edition of Character Talks. And again, seem to say it all the time, but I love doing podcasts like this because I get to chat with folks that truly inspire me. And our guest this week is no different. Alastair Humphreys, I have followed kind of behind the scenes for many years. And then I happened to listen to you on a podcast, Wild Ideas Worth Living, with Shelby Stanger, and really dove in at that point because one of your new books is Microadventures, which so aligns with everything with the Mill. So before we get going, coming in from the UK, Alastair, welcome to Character Talks.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
Yeah, this is going to be a lot of fun. We just spoke for a few minutes about the program and the project and the Mill and what you're doing. But to get started and to kind of establish a baseline, because you have done so much, can you give the folks that are listening kind of a summary of who you are and some of the things you've done? Because you have, when you talk about adventures, you have to be, if you look in the dictionary, it has to be your picture, it seems like.
My name's Alistair. I'm English, and I've done some big adventures. So they would include spending 4 years cycling 46,000 miles around the world, 60 countries, 4 years, all for about $10,000. I've rowed across the Atlantic Ocean in a little rowing boat. I've walked across southern India. I've done some expeditions up in the Arctic. I've crossed Iceland by foot and by pack raft. What else have I done? Oh, I crossed the empty quarter desert in the Middle East with a really badly designed car. I can say that because I designed it. It was terrible. And I've spent a month hiking through Spain with no money or credit card and only my violin to earn some money, which sounds great, except that I really can't play the violin at all. And I'm not just being mock humble, polite British there. I really do suck. So yeah, quite a range of big human-powered adventures. And my interest, I suppose, has always been to try and do different sorts of journeys in different ways in different places. So rather than becoming, for example, a specialist mountaineer, I really like just being a beginner and doing lots of different things.
So it's almost like that beginner mindset. I just did a podcast with someone kind of that with a very Zen-like approach to some of the adventures that she did. And it's almost like that beginner's mindset. Is that part of the intrigue of some of the journeys? Is that you aren't an expert in that?
Yeah, very much. I love being a beginner and I love giving myself the permission to be really bad, to have no idea what's going on, no idea how this is going to work out, but choosing for that to be an exciting blank piece of paper, a new beginning. Like, wow, this is great. I've got to learn how to make a cart, fill it with stuff and cross the desert. This is exciting. And then you have to learn quickly, of course, to get halfway decent competent so that you don't die and you succeed at the adventure. And I love that. But once I'm sort of moderately good at something, then for me, a lot of the thrill has gone out of it, and I'm on to the next thing. And so I'm much more of a dabbler rather than a pushing to be perfect at one thing.
You mentioned something uh, at the start there of that you give yourself permission to make, mistakes or to learn something new, and I think that's so important. That's one of the tricks or tools that I have for coaching, that when someone tries to learn something new, I actually tell them they have to say it out loud so their ears can hear it, that I have given myself permission to do this. And sometimes
Mm.
you have to actually hear it. So it's interesting that you said that you have to give yourself permission just to chase something new and different. So is there an adventure, because I know in the podcast with Shelby you focused a lot on the 46,000-mile bike trip. Is there an adventure that maybe you don't talk about a lot, that just kind of sticks into your head as, for whatever reason, it was an adventure that you hadn't, some things that occurred that you hadn't planned on, or is there one that just kind of is extra special?
Well, I mean, I end up talking about cycling around the world a lot because that was the biggest, and also it's kind of relatable to a lot of people in some ways. But I think, and in light of the direction that I'm guessing this conversation might go, I really have a soft spot in my heart for the crossing of Spain with the violin. So what I was doing there, I was following the route of an old book from the 1930s. A young English guy called Laurie Lee walked through Spain just before the Civil War began in Spain. And he wrote a beautiful book about it called As I Walked Out One Midsummer Morning. And it's a very beautiful, simple, poetic sort of book. And not much happens. And it's just the story of a young guy having an adventure. He's no particularly tough guy. Not a lot happens. It's just like a normal guy, like you or me having an adventure. It's very beautiful. And ever since I first read it at university, I've read it pretty much every year since, always thinking, this is such a lovely story. I'd love to go and do that. But if you're going to follow Laurie Lee through Spain, then really you have to be playing the violin. That's a core part of it. And I can't play the violin or any other musical instrument. And actually, the thought of having to perform in public, dancing at weddings or singing karaoke just fills me with fear and terror. It's like the worst, scariest thing, much scarier than ocean waves or mountains or something like that. So, deciding to do that was about me redefining adventure, thinking what is adventure for me. I've spent literally thousands of nights camping out under the stars and pushing myself physically hard and getting tired, that all the adventure stuff, but I've done that so often that I kind of know what it's like. So perhaps in my own way that's actually me being in a rut and a routine and a comfort zone. And if I want to get out of my comfort zone and dare myself to be adventurous, maybe what I really need to do is go and learn the violin like a little 6-year-old kid. So I did 7 months of violin lessons, which I realized was nowhere near enough time. I mean, after 7 months, I really sucked. If you can listen on YouTube to hear how bad I was. And walking out into Spain with no money in my pocket, no credit card, no way to get a meal except by playing the violin was terrifying, but also thrilling. And it felt really, really adventurous.
Was that by choice, going with the no money and in order to play, to make it that more impactful?
Yeah, completely. No, so Laurie Lee, of course, the younger original guy, he was playing the violin through Spain to earn money. He was really good at the violin, so he was forever earning money to get big bottles of wine, and there's books full of him drinking wine and beautiful Spanish girls, and it's just fantastic. So yeah, the violin had to be a core part of it. And when I started the lessons, my assumption was I'll do 6 months of lessons, I'll be quite good, and I'll earn some money, and I'll drink lots of wine. It'll be great. The reality was, after 6 months, I sucked. And I was just thinking, no one's going to give me any money, which then left two sorts of sensible options. One would be to postpone a couple of years, but I'm not really into postponing. I just want to get on with things. And the second was to go to Spain with the violin, but also take my credit card and just play the violin for a bit of fun. But that's a wimpy option. That's not the adventure. That's a holiday in Spain with a violin. So I just had to just dare myself to say, well, you wanted scary. Now you're going to get it because you really suck. And if you want to eat some food, you've got to work this out somehow. So the having no money part was absolutely essential to the project.
I love that you said you dared yourself. I think that's such a key part to adventures, that adventures don't need to involve other people and letting other people know what you're doing. Just the fact that you dared yourself, I think, is such an important part.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, if you might think that an adventurer, you think of someone like, say, Bear Grylls, who's like really brave and just goes off and does stuff. But, if you're just brave and go off and do stuff, that's not an adventure, that's a vacation. An adventure has to involve you being scared and doubting yourself and thinking you might fail and not knowing the exact outcome. And if you're not feeling a bit out of your depth and a bit scared, then you're on a vacation. So, yeah, it's very much about embracing being rubbish at stuff, daring yourself to begin, accepting that the only way to get competent and confident is by overcoming the hurdle of starting without either of those valuable things, and just going for it. So yeah, that's a really big part of it, is daring yourself to begin.
Yeah, I think, and one of the questions that we talked about that I was going to ask is, how do you define adventure? You may have just done that. We define the adventure the same way in the mill. We say embarking on something where the outcome is uncertain,
Yes, yeah.
and oftentimes the uncertainty is what provides the most fear, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this has been, for me, my adventuring life began with the trips I mentioned earlier, which are fairly sort of conventional, big expedition, sort of National Geographic type big fun things. And there, I think people would agree, are adventures. But once I started to decide that playing the violin was an adventure, that became really interesting, because if you broadens out the definition of adventure, it includes then far more people who have no desire to go sleep in a tent on a mountain. But living adventurously then becomes a much broader concept than the literal go to REI and buy a bunch of hiking gear kind of adventure. And that's exciting, because it's much more interesting if playing a violin is one of the biggest adventures of your life.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. Now I've got another book that I need to go read, yet another. So, again, within the mill, we really believe that going on adventures is where we learn more about ourselves, and that's where our character growth really begins to occur. Is there any certain events or things that happened in those adventures where you sat back and you noticed that there was either a growth in character or kind of a change in how you viewed things, or those types of things? Is there any episodes that stick out where you really notice some growth?
I think there are many occasions like that, and for me, nearly always involve me having a really miserable time, being cold or hot or scared or crying or hungry, or probably combinations of all of the above. And bear in mind my initial thing, that if you don't have those things, then you're on a vacation. So part of the adventures is pushing yourself to see how you cope with those sort of things, which is daunting at first. But once you start to do it and you get through a situation, you think, huh, I did all right there. Huh, I'm not as pathetic as I thought I was. And you get a little bit taller, and you go on a little bit taller, and then the next time you stumble down, you feel, huh, yeah, this is good. But also the other character side that I think of is about adventures is one is the sort of building up of your self-confidence there that I talked about, and your resilience and your ability to laugh at yourself, and those sort of really positive things. But the other stuff that's great about adventures is it's good at giving you a good old smackdown. If ever you're starting to think, hey, I'm pretty amazing, I'm a bit of a legend, then a few cold nights in a tent, or a bit of a terrifying storm mid-ocean, is a very good humbling way of realizing you're not quite as incredible as you thought you were. So I've really enjoyed that. I feel that adventures have taken the edges off maybe the worst and the best of my natural genetic character, as in it's brought me up. It's made me think, hey, I'm not as pathetic and useless and as much of a loser as I used to think I was. But it's also smacks me down if ever I start to get a bit cocky that I'm a superstar.
Love that. So I'm going to bring it back. So to start the launch of the mill, I was going to walk from North Carolina, here in the eastern side of the US, up to Maine. It was going to be called Character Walk 2023. I had partnered with 7 different animal rescues, and I was going to essentially retrace the steps of my dog, because I rescued my dog in North Carolina. And so she was going to walk with me. Unfortunately, due to some family things, I only got about 400 miles of the walk in itself. That was great. But I think I was exactly what you talked about. Like, I had all the confidence in the world. I knew what I was doing. And then I got out there, and as I started walking, I said, "Oh, where the hell am I sleeping tonight?" You know,
Yeah.
I'm not a 22-year-old guy out with a backpack. You know, at the time I'm a 56-year-old, you know, guy walking on the back roads of North Carolina, and it was those fears that I was completely out of my element, and it scared me. And it didn't scare me that someone was going to drive up or an animal was going to come out. I was prepared. I was okay with that. I spent a lot of time out in the woods, but I didn't know where I was going to sleep at night. And it was just
Yeah.
the very simplest of things of where do I sleep? And yeah, we ended up sleeping behind, you know, highway lawnmowers on the side of the roads out in the woods, and slept out behind someone's store one night. And so, yeah,
And that's great. I mean, I think if people go on an adventure and in order for them to be able to do it, they need to book in a motel every night, then that's fine. But if you can get to the level of daring yourself, think, whoa, where am I going to sleep tonight? And you end up just in the woods and things, then wow, that just feels great. Because doesn't it feel great the next morning when you wake up? You're like, whoa, I'm hiding behind something next to the highway. This is crazy. This is an adventure. You feel like a Huckleberry Finn or somebody. So I'm also interested how even now as a fully grown adult, I'm still scared of the dark. So there's always still that slight nervousness of the dark, and then the joy of the sunrise and the dawn. Like, yeah, life's good again.
yeah, you're right. You're exactly right. Because I think every morning I did wake up, and went, okay, why are you fearing this, Chris? Like, why are
Yeah.
you doing that? You're going to be okay.
Mm.
You have the skills to make it through this. But it was a little bit of, again, the unknown is can be scary.
I set some rules early on my adventures in terms of quitting because you're often tempted to quit on big trips, aren't you? And one of my and you don't want, but you don't want to give up too easily because you'll regret that. So you have to set some rules early on. So some of my rules were I was not allowed to quit at night time or when I was cold, wet, scared, or hungry. I could only give or tired. I could only give up on a nice sunny morning after a large breakfast. And if the world still sucked and I could think of something better to do with my life, then hey, maybe go do it. But having those checks and balances really stops you just calling it a day too early.
That's fantastic. Yeah, it is. I guess, yeah, that's a great approach. I love that. You know, each guest that comes on comes in with a word, and your word is adventures. Uh, and I know that's something that you're kind of on a mission for, is to get people adventuring more. Can you talk a little bit about some of the things that you're doing to inspire people to get out? Because again, it aligns so closely with what we're doing. So what are you doing to kind of inspire people to get out there and adventure more?
Well, it's evolved, I suppose. It's geez, I'm getting old. It's 20 over 20 years since I set off to cycle around the world. And when I started doing that and I first started blogging, I was trying to say to people, hey, it's great to have a big adventure. Get a bicycle, go cycle around the world. And I still stand by that message. But it's evolved now to going from the big adventures. My adventures have got gradually smaller and smaller and smaller. And I started advocating what I call micro adventures, which are just short, simple, affordable, nearby versions of big adventures that you can squeeze in around busy working lives until the time comes for the adventure of a lifetime. Until you get your adventure of a lifetime, don't just do nothing, get on with having a lifetime of living a little bit adventurously every day. So squeezing tiny little bits of adventure around the margin. So I've been trying to do that to encourage people that it's not normal life or adventure, but trying to mix the two together just to make daily working life with families and jobs and things just a little bit richer and spicier. And then things through sort of doing the violin playing that has made me start to think that wow, living adventurously is much broader than just stuff that involves tents and bicycles and dehydrated meals. It's much broader. It's about curiosity and enthusiasm and the sort of things we've been talking about, daring yourself to begin and having a go and being willing to look bad and people laugh at you, but you've given it a try. So my approach to encouraging adventures evolved quite a lot over the years.
Yeah, there was one thing that I read. It might have been in one of your talks where, you know, it seems like we seem to focus on our 9 to 5. You know, everyone's worried about their 9 to 5, their job, and how that literally controls their day. And you talk about the importance of, well, what about the 5 to 9? What about that
Yeah,
5 o'clock to
absolutely.
getting out to 9 o'clock in the morning when we go back? What about that period of time? Why can't we make that our priority every day? and then go to work just so we can, so then we have that 5 to 9 period of getting out and doing things.
Yeah, and I know that in the reality of real life, well, we've all got commitments and stuff and things to do. But I think if nothing else, it's a really interesting thought experiment to think if someone says to you, "Hey, Chris, tell me about yourself," and you say, "Hi, my name's Chris, and I'm a full-time librarian." Um, and that's then everyone says, "Oh, there's Chris. He's the full-time librarian." But that's you're not at all. That's from 9 to 5, and then 16 hours of the day, 2/3 of your entire life. You've just not even told us about. And what do you do in those 2/3 of your life? Probably just you go home from the library and you're exhausted after a heavy day carrying books around. So you just eat a bit of food, watch a bit of TV, go to sleep, and get up in the morning to do it again. What a waste of 2/3 of your life. So what I've what I've been trying to do is to get people to flip round their mindset. And I suppose this comes from, say, doing big adventures, when you're scared and you don't know where you're going to sleep tonight, you can think, oh, this is a really bad thing. Or you can just try and make yourself laugh, to walk down the road just laughing, thinking, this is crazy. I'm a middle-aged guy. I've got no idea where I'm going to sleep tonight. This is hilarious. This is fun. This is adventurous. So trying to flip your mindset round. So 5 to 9 is about finishing work, because everyone's got to work, but then choosing what can you do in those extra hours. And one little small example that I use is to just pack a small backpack with some basic things that you need to go camp for the night, and just head out of town to somewhere near to you where you can camp for the night. And maybe that might even be in your backyard. I mean, I used to love camping in my backyard as a kid. Turns out as an adult, it's still kind of fun to do. And then in the morning when you wake up, you head back to work and you get back to the library, and all your colleagues at the library, they're lugging books around, and you can say, hey, last night I had a micro adventure. And yeah, you'll be a bit tired, you wouldn't have got a great night's sleep, but I can guarantee you'll remember that night for years to come. So look for the opportunity for adventure rather than moaning about the barriers in life, because we've all got different barriers in life. So what are the opportunities?
Yeah, that's important. So do you have other ideas or thoughts for micro adventures? Because I think that that is such an important piece. And again, we talk about a lot with the mill, is adventures can be whatever they are for you. And everyone has an adventure that's crazy. Some people can't even imagine riding a bike around the world or walking through Iceland. They can't even begin to imagine. I don't know if I can, and I consider myself that, a fairly adventurous person, have done some good things. But what are some in the talks that you've had with people as the book has come out? What are some other ideas that toss some ideas out to folks that are listening, of other micro adventures they might entertain?
Okay, well, I'll give you a really small one, which I think is good because it's very inclusive, but it's also brings in a really vital part, I believe, of adventuring, which is scheduling adventure into your life. You could just say, hey, this summertime, you say to your friend, this summertime, we should go and do an adventure together. And you both go, yeah, that'd be great. And then, of course, summertime comes along and you're busy and everything happens and you never get around to it. So scheduling a little bit of adventure into your diary, into your calendar, is really helpful. So, for example, for 3 years, I climbed a tree once every month. And that was a great little experience. It's just 20 minutes away from my emails, sitting in a little tree near my house, just noticing that, hey, wow, the seasons are changing, the birds are singing, the fall leaves are coming. But I wouldn't have got around to doing that without scheduling into my Google Calendar, bing, go climb a tree. And then a really nice example that's less athletic than having to climb a tree is I worked together with this a paper cut artist. She's American actually, and we were chatting about what do we both enjoy, and we realised that the overlap in our lives. We both liked adventure and we both liked coffee. So we came up with this idea that once a month on the new moon, we would go and do some sort of adventure involving coffee. And then I would write an essay about it because I like writing, and she would do a lovely bit of paper cut art. And these are really tiny. For example, maybe let's say once a month you meet your buddy for a coffee and catch up about life, and you always meet at Starbucks. Why not next month agree to go meet in a bit of woodland just out of town that you've never been to before? And then the month after that, go hike up a small hill for your coffee. Or one month, wait till it's absolutely pouring with rain when no one sensible would go outside, and go sit under a tree and have your coffee out there, or go for a swim in the creek and then have a coffee. So tiny little things that just shake up your rut and routine. They get you out into nature, which is so good for our physical and for mental health. They just make you pause, and they just bring back a little bit of childlike joy and playfulness to your life. And we become so boring when we're adults that just trying to get a bit of playfulness and scheduling that into your calendar. Boom, boom, boom. This is non-negotiable. I'm going to have a cup of coffee this month sitting under a tree. And if you think you don't have time to spend having a cup of coffee under a tree, you probably need to spend the time having 2 cups of coffee under a tree. What are your priorities?
Yeah, that's fantastic. And it's the thought that keeps popping into my head, it keeps coming back, is that childlike, that beginner mindset of just not being afraid to. I think there's a great quote somewhere, and I'm going to butcher it, but essentially, like, be brave enough to learn something new. It is so easy to do the things that are comfortable, that we know, that we get us by, that are safe. That be a little unsafe and a little wild and a little adventurous is fantastic.
I think it's interesting, isn't it? If anyone's got kids, then you when you got little kids, you're always trying to encourage them, like, hey, go and join the gymnastics class. You might like it. Let's go and do little league. Let's go play some basketball. You might like it. If you don't like it, fine. We'll go and find another club. But and if you suck, it doesn't matter. Just try your best. Have fun. Make some friends. When was the last time we as adults thought, you know what? I'm going to go and join the baseball club or something like that. Just doing we don't do new things. We're embarrassed to be bad at stuff when we're adults, in the way that we'd be really appalled if and worried if our children acted that way.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what do you think? Why is that? Why do we stop doing that? Why do we stop saying, "Well, I want to go do this, and why can't I?" What is it the fear of being embarrassed, or that type of thing? Do you think, what have you found to what stops people from continuing to have that childlike mentality?
I'm not sure, but it's definitely true that we become incredibly boring once we're adults. When I go and do talks at, say, an elementary school, and I say to all the kids, who here wants to cycle around the world? Every kid puts their hand up, like, me, yeah, woo, yeah, let's do it. And I go and talk to a bunch of adults who wants to cycle around the world. They'll go, oh, well, I need to save $10,000 for a bicycle, and I'll have to look at my insurance. And oh my goodness, we're so boring. So I think there's definitely that aspect of it. But also, I think the fear of being laughed at, which we worry about when we're little kids, I think there's still that in there. When I talk to people about playing the violin through Spain, it's amazing how often people say, oh man, I could never do that. That's much more terrifying than crossing a desert. Why is it terrifying? You're in a country where nobody knows you. Nobody who walks past you will ever see you again, but still you're worried about people staring at you, looking a bit silly. Maybe someone might laugh at you. It's crazy, but that was genuinely what was scaring me as a fully grown adult in a country where nobody knew my name. I was still worried about looking different and being embarrassed.
Yeah, I just had this conversation with someone the other day. It came from one of my mentors, and said, we're all concerned about what other people think of us. And if we realize actually how very little they actually do think about us, we probably would be a lot less concerned.
Yeah, there's some sort of official term for it, like spotlight syndrome or something, I think. For example, if you have to go to let's say a funeral, and you suddenly realize, oh, I've accidentally worn a bright red tie, everyone's going to be staring at me. No one notices because everyone's worried about their own ties and things. So yeah, completely, totally, that's such a thing. We're so narcissistic. We think everyone cares about us all the time, but no, we each care about ourselves, not what everyone else is doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think the best way to stop that spotlighting or that fear is to go back to one of the original things that you said, which is to be brave and dare yourself. So instead of
Yes.
feeling that fear, flip it around, because it's purely a choice. It's not something tangible. It's a choice to feel and think that way. So turn it around and dare yourself. What's next for Alistair? You got anything in the works that you can share?
Yeah, well, I've actually gone even smaller than Microadventures now. So I've gone from the whole world. So I've now just been spending a lot of time exploring the single map where I live, which is literally the area around my neighborhood. It measures about 10 miles by 10 miles. In America, you have these maps called the US Topo 7.5 minute maps. I think you look them up on the US Gov website, and you can get for free the PDF of where you live, the hiking map. And what I've been doing is just going out and finding one little area of it, 1 kilometer grid square at a time, and trying my best to see everything in that 1 kilometer grid square. Once a week, I go to a different grid square and I try and see everything. And what this is really helping me to do is to learn to notice, to be observant, to be curious, and to stop taking for granted everywhere where I live. Where I live, I see it every day, and therefore I think it's boring. So, when we started our call, you're telling me where you were, and I'm immediately looking at my world map, thinking, "Oh man, that sounds so much more exciting than where I am." But if you could teleport to my house now, you'd be really interested in it. So I'm trying to explore my backyard with the curiosity and enthusiasm I have when I get dumped in the middle of China or Africa or somewhere. Because I think the most important part of adventuring is not the geography of the places you go, but the mindset with which you explore. So the curiosity and the enthusiasm is much more important than buying an expensive plane ticket to the other side of the world. So yeah, I've gone very small, very local. I've actually just written a new book called Local, which is all about trying to find nearby nature and wildness.
I love what you said, that the adventuring is a mindset. That really so aligns with what you're talking about, that it isn't, so people I think get bogged down with the adventure and the planning of and the execution of the adventure, when really adventuring, it's just a mindset. That's fantastic.
Yeah. I can probably think back to times when I was cycling around the world. So I was on the road for 4 years. I didn't come home for 4 years. And there were probably chunks of maybe an entire country or certainly a few weeks when I was a bit bored. I was like, I'm riding through X country and all I've got to do in the morning is get up and ride 80 miles a day and go to bed. And I did that every day. So it's no big deal. And that wasn't adventure for me. That was me just doing something boring in a distant country because my heart wasn't in it for whatever reason for that little period of time. So yeah, you don't need to go to the other end of the world. You just need to decide that this is exciting and I'm going to be curious about it. And once you're interested in everything, then everything becomes interesting. And that's really a lovely feedback loop too.
Yeah, that's great. I just did a blog post that'll be released, I think, next week. And it's all about pausing. Like wherever you are, just pause. And it's so important that whether someone says something to us that we don't agree with, and then we want to react to that, it's a pause. But it also could be when you're out in your backyard and you're tending to your garden or your whatever you're doing, just pause. And just like you said, just kind of appreciate around. And I have found, actually, since listening to your podcast and you were talking about local and the 1 kilometer squares that you are doing with, I have made it a point now of when I go out, I'm not as organized as that, but when I go out now, I purposely look for things that I haven't noticed before, even in my backyard. And I've got a little land around the house, and so I walk around and just stop and go, "Oh, I haven't seen that before. Oh, that's very cool. Oh, look at that tree. I've never seen that tree before. That tree's amazing."
Mhm.
So I think
Nice.
that's so important. Again, it's adventures. They don't have to be the grand scale. They can be just whatever it is, and for you, and simple.
Absolutely.
Learning to play violin.
Yes. Or learning to just sit on a log in the woods in your own company for 5 minutes. That's a pretty daunting thing that I try and do as well, to just sort of pay attention and slow down and pause.
Yeah, that's interesting, because when we first launched the mill a few years ago, we discovered that when the top of the website is what defines who you are, and that sometimes is a scary question. I know, for a long time, I was afraid of that question myself. I didn't want to really, I don't know if I really wanted to take a hard look at who I was.
Yeah.
And now I appreciate that adventure. I appreciate that journey. I don't mind it. I know what my strengths are, and I embrace my weaknesses and say, okay, well, that is a weakness, so I'm going to get a little better. That's why I think part of the reason I do this podcast is I get to interview people that have done things that I have not done yet. Or, I did a ultra marathoner, and I said, well, when the Lord created this body, he was not thinking ultra marathoner, and so when people do things that I haven't done yet, that inspires me. Alistair, thank you. I'm going to make sure that all of the links to your books, I'm encouraging folks, if you're listening, go follow him on all the socials. I'll be sure to put all the links in there as well. He has an amazing newsletter, but he's got all sorts of books. Has Local come out, the book? Has that come out yet?
Yep, that's out. Yep.
Okay. So we'll put all the links in there. We're also going to do something. We're going to purchase a number of of books from Alistair, and we're going to do a little contest within the app. That if you go in and you write a comment about after you've listened to the podcast, then we'll get you into a contest to win a copy of the book. I'm excited to read them as well. But Alistair,
Fantastic.
any final thoughts on micro adventuring, words of advice for folks that are listening?
I would say if you're thinking, oh, that sounds exciting, and I'd like to do so and so in my life, but then you need to work out what the but is, and don't get upset about that because we've all got buts. I was about to say we've all got buts. Just try and think of something smaller than that, and then think, oh yeah, I can get excited about that, and keep thinking of smaller and smaller little adventurous ideas until you feel you've got the confidence and momentum to get out the door and begin, and then the confidence starts to grow and the adventures can get bigger, or not necessarily bigger, they can get deeper and richer and more regular and more meaningful. But start.
Yeah, take that first step. And
Absolutely.
and perhaps the first step for folks that are listening was listening to this podcast today, because I'm inspired. Alistair, again, thank you so much for your time, your knowledge. I can't wait to dive into the books and start adventuring a little more.
Fantastic. Thanks very much for having me.
Wow, as we wrap up this episode of Character Talks, I want to extend a heartfelt thank you to Alastair Humphreys for sharing his incredible journey, and more importantly, for inspiring us all to find adventure in our everyday lives. Alastair's stories, whether they're about cycling across continents or trekking the M25, remind us that adventure is not just something grand or distant. It's something we can invite into our lives, even in the simplest ways. His concept of microadventures truly captures the spirit of exploration, showing us that adventure is not about where we go, but how we approach life. So whether you're planning a big trip or just looking for a new way to spend an afternoon, Alistair's philosophy reminds us that there's always something worth discovering. We're deeply grateful for his time, wisdom, and for encouraging us all to step out of our routines and embrace the unknown, no matter how close to home it may be. We also thank you, and before you go, remember to download The Mill, a place where you can live out your adventures, big and small, and connect with a community that inspires each other daily. Try it free for 30 days and start your next adventure today. Thank you for tuning in, and as always, keep seeking those moments that make life truly adventurous.